So, when did you start planting ginseng?
I think it was 1989 when I first planted any ginseng. I had had attended some conferences through Rural Action that were people who were growing it for profit, and I learned how to do that and was excited about doing it, thinking that would be a good way to earn some funds for my retirement.
And before those conferences, what were you doing here on the farm?
This is a registered tree farm, and so we registered the farm as a tree farm. We've had three harvests. The first two were TSI harvests, where we harvested a lot of beech and low value trees in order to open the woods up to the higher value oaks. And then the last harvest we had was a harvest after an ice storm. So it was a salvage harvest where a lot of trees had been bent over, a lot of trees had gone down, a lot of tops went out of trees. And so we went in and harvested about 50 acres of damaged trees from the ice storm. And then as after we got the farm about 25 years ago, of course we had to have cattle, we had to have goats, we had to have all the animals that people that live on a farm or move to a farm think they have to have. Right now I have some chickens and I have some horses, and that's about it. So we've gone through that phase. But I like to think that my wife and I, people ask me, what do you raise on the farm? And I said, grandkids, because my two sons live across the creek close to us. Each of them have three girls, and we've enjoyed very much. In fact, last night, one of the girls came over with her boyfriend, and we spent some time together. It's been very enjoyable.
Now, you said earlier that you first started hunting ginseng with your grandfather when you were about 7. Have you passed along the interest in growing ginseng and in plants and all of that to your grandkids?
Not really, to be honest with you. I think my sons and their children, are probably more upset over people coming onto the property and stealing it, and they see it as they don't want to do that. They have helped me. Both my boys have. The granddaughters, not so much. They're not much to be in the woods, so they do hunt. But no, not really. I haven't passed that on to them. Maybe I should. Still time to do that, I guess.
And on your part, is that because of the poaching and the theft?
Yes. I really would hesitate to have my granddaughters out in the woods planting or digging ginseng with the poachers, the thieves that I've encountered. I don't think it would be wise for them to be out there. I really don't.
What did it mean for you growing up to be going out into the woods and to be hunting ginseng with your grandfather?
It meant a quarter if I did a real good job. No, besides the money, it was great just to be with my grandfather. And he passed away really when I was 8. So this was a short time before he died. So it does mean a lot. But I've done a lot with my granddaughters and grandsons as well. Maybe not digging ginseng or planting ginseng, but we've hunted and been in the woods. Just recently we went and got some buckeyes, so gathered some of those. So they do get into the woods at times, but I'm usually with them, or their father is with them.
And is that for a safety reason that they're not there by themselves?
Right. I just don't think it's wise for them to be in the woods by themselves. You got it right there. Not that I live in fear, because I don't live in fear. and I don't want them to live in fear. But you have to be wise, and when you look around and see your surroundings and know what's happening, and not take unnecessary chances. And I just feel like that would be unnecessary chance to put them out there by themselves. So they need someone to be with them, I think.
Earlier you talked about how you had hoped that ginseng could help fund your retirement.
Mm-hmm.
Has it been able to do that or contribute to that in any way?
I've been planning it for 17 years, 18 years, in that neighborhood. To date, I've probably sold less than $3,000 worth. That doesn't go a long way on your retirement, I can tell you. Will I sell more? Yeah, I'll sell more. I'm selling some every year. My goal when I started was maybe having $40,000-$50,000 from the ginseng. If I get 5,000, that would be probably good. Now that's a start, but again, it has meant more to me than just the money. And one of the things is this is a heritage farm. This is a farm my grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather grew up on. My great-great-grandfather homesteaded. He cleared the hills. And so it means a lot for me to be in the woods. And so I've benefited in that way. Also, I've benefited greatly because I've met a lot of people, some of them from UPS, United Plant Savers, some of them from Rural Action, some from ODNR, that have meant a lot to me and become friends, and I value that. So it's not been a lost cause. Plus, I got a lot of really good exercise. Climbing these hills, raking leaves back, digging in the soil and planting seeds in an atmosphere, and I planted entirely in the fall. This is the time I would start planting and go till the ground froze, okay, which sometimes you could plant till Christmas. Beautiful time to be in the woods. Appreciate nature. I mean, you have squirrels running around, and deer and turkeys and birds of all sorts. So I look at it, I've gained a lot. Now I could have spent my time in the gym exercising, I know, but it's a whole lot nicer to walk up in the hills and exercise up there. And I always take a bucket seat with me, a little snack and some water, and to just sit there and enjoy the woods of southern Ohio and this part of Appalachia. It's hard to put a value on that. And so I look back, and I'm not really bitter because I've been poached so many times. I've gained a lot. I really feel like I have gained a lot. I've gained a lot of friends and gained a lot of enjoyment by just being up in the woods and planting and digging roots.
You said that normally you would be planting this time of year. Does that mean that you are no longer planting?
If I can obtain some seed, I will plant a small amount this year. I'm not planting any 10 pounds, perhaps a half pound. The area where UPS came out and dug the golden seal, I would like to go back and plant that with ginseng. But you have to realize, I'll be 71 next week. If I plant that this year, it'll come up next spring in April. It will probably take 10, 15 years. That means I'm 86. Am I going to be up there digging it when I'm 86? I don't know. Maybe my sons will. But I have reached that point where if I were going to do it again, and my advice to a young man or woman that wants to raise ginseng, do it when you're young, because there's a learning curve it's going to take place. Whether it's poaching or it's ice storms, ginseng is that product that takes a long time. You don't plant it this year and harvest it next year, or the next year, or the next year, or the next year. It really doesn't get good until maybe it's 10, 15, 20 years old. Then you have some valuable product. A lot of things can happen in 20 years. A lot. And I've seen it. I've had droughts where I've lost some. I've planted, had beautiful patches of ginseng, and the turkeys would come through and just dig it all up. You know, maybe it was, they wouldn't eat the ginseng, but they would uncover it, and so it would dry out and die. We had an ice storm, took the tops out of trees and no shade. Just plus the fact you have deers that love to eat it, mice, voles love to eat it. It tastes good, and so they'll go in and eat it. And once it's eaten, it's gone. So there's a lot of things that can happen to your ginseng. Makes it interesting, you know. When you plant ginseng, sometimes you think you find the perfect spot. You know, the drainage is good. It's on a north-facing slope. You've got poplar trees, and you've got some natural herbs that are growing there, like golden seal or maidenhair ferns and things like that. And you plant the seed, it doesn't come up. I have no explanation for it. It's just, that's ginseng. It's you learn, and that learning curve takes a long time. I found that out in talking to some of these older people. I look back, now I'm the older person, but these older people who had been doing it all their lives, and they had a wealth of information as far as where to plant it, how to plant it, and to just start out and do it, it's going to take a long time for you to reach that learning curve where you're really good at it. And then somebody will come along and steal it from you. No, hopefully not. But I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the people I've met. Like I said, through Rural Action, RAGA, SOFA, other organizations, invaluable. So I'm not a loser. I'm a winner, no matter if they steal all of it, you know. But hopefully I'll continue to dig until I'm no longer. I always tell my wife, I said, you know, if I don't come down off the hill, because she worries, I said, you know, just wait a while and then send guys up and they can find me, because I can't think of a better way to go than be up in the woods. I really can't.
Do you know how much has been stolen from you over the years?
Not really. I in preparation for this, I was trying to think. There's been a lot of times that I didn't even know it was poached. We would take off and go on vacation for a few weeks, and poachers come in and dig it, and then the leaves fall, and you can't even tell that they've dug it until the next year. I would estimate probably 10 times as much as I've dug has been poached from me. I had one patch across the road and over top on the other side of the hill, and I planted it with black cohosh. And I planted a black cohosh root, and then about 8 or 9 inches behind that I planted ginseng. The most beautiful ginseng. I mean, it was, at 5 years, I had 3-prong plants. Big, tall, beautiful plants. And I never even thought about digging it, because I thought, wow, this stuff was really growing good. And one day I went over there, and somebody had found it, and they dug every one. I mean, it just went right down, bang, bang, bang. Dig here, dig here, dig here. They're small roots. Even though the plants were big, the roots had not had time to develop a lot of size. But that was probably dug several pounds at that time. I've had quite a bit stolen. I don't really know how to put that into poundage or value, but thousands of dollars worth, undoubtedly. And it's like, when they would dig it, a lot of them would dig this small. Legally, you can dig a 3-prong plant. Well, that 3-prong plant, if it's planted in a good place, it may only be 4 or 5 years old. It's got a small root, but if you would leave that go for another 10 years, you could have a really nice size, valuable root. It's like going into the woods and taking a little pole, white oak, it's only 4 inches in diameter, and cutting it down. Well, that tree is just beginning to grow, and each year it's going to put in a lot of value. You don't want to cut it down when it's 4 inches. You want to wait till it's 30, and then cut it down. Then you'll have something that's worth a lot of money. But the value of it, several thousands of dollars. The number of, like I said, I planted 500,000 seeds. Of those, maybe half of them came up, maybe more. So they probably harvested 100,000 plants from me in that neighborhood.
Now, earlier John was telling me about going out with a gun, a shotgun.
No, rifle.
Sorry, I don't know much about guns. With a rifle, and how he wasn't sure where the poachers were coming from. Can you tell me a little bit more about who you were finding when you did come across people?
After I was poached the first time, I sat on a hill and waited with my gun. And 5 different people came walking through my woods. Where they came from, I'm not really sure. They had walked probably, maybe several miles looking for ginseng. They were ginseng hunters. And they don't really care if you have no trespassing signs or fences or anything else. It's as though I'm going to hunt it. It's just a weed. It's just a plant, and it grows wild, and it does grow wild. When I first moved out here, having dug ginseng with my grandfather, I thought, well, I'm going to go see where all the ginseng is. And I looked and I looked and I looked. I could not find any ginseng. The poachers or thieves had completely annihilated it, taken it all out. And that's typical of today's poachers. They don't dig it ethically and with the idea that next year they'll come back and get more. They dig it with the idea, I'm going to dig every plant. I don't care how small it is. I'm going to dig it. And I'm not going to plant the seeds back because I'll probably never be back this way again.
So they're not locals?
I'm sorry?
So they're not locals?
They are locals. But they're not the ginseng diggers of past times who were very ethical in their digging and planting seeds back and only taking the biggest plants and never taking more than a third of the patch of the area that you're hunting. These kind of people just dig it all, and so it's gone. And they don't plant the seeds back so it doesn't come back. And so they completely get rid of it on your farm or in the area. In olden days, like my grandfather, he knew how to dig it. He dug only the biggest plants. You planted the seeds back. That way next year you could go back and still dig enough for your Christmas money.
And what's the difference between the people that were digging back then and the people that are digging now?
Excellent question. I wish I knew the answer to that. I think a lot of people wish they knew the answer to that. I think our society is, my personal opinion is people think only of themselves today. They don't think about future generations. They don't think about other people's property. They don't think about hurting other people. They're just concerned in one thing, and that's themselves. This is what I can gain from this, and I'll gain as much as I can. I don't care, if it's on someone else's property. I don't care if I damage it. I don't care if I'm stealing it. I'm thinking of one person, that's me. And I think our society is built around that. we don't think of others. We don't think of the future. We think of the right now.
Could that also be a little bit due to where people are learning about ginseng from? Like you learned it from your grandfather, and so there were traditions that he also taught you around it. Where are people learning about it now, and how do you see that affecting what they're doing or not doing?
I think a lot of them are learning it from reality TV shows, and then from those who have been poachers. So they're learning it from the wrong people. I went to West Virginia and met with a group of, these were not just growers, these were gatherers, these were diggers. And way back in the boondocks in West Virginia, wonderful bunch of men and women. There's some women who also are diggers. But these people, they knew how to take care of their ginseng patches. The ones that get on my property and steal, I think they have learned how to identify it, how to dig it, how to steal it from people who have dug it and stole it before. And so they've really not been taught the right way. How do you change that? I don't know. I wish I did.
So we've been using the terms diggers and hunters of ginseng. Is there a difference, or are they used interchangeably?
I'm using them interchangeably. The digger, the hunter, they're out in the woods looking for ginseng. Some are good, ethical, that will ask to dig on property and get permission before they would ever dig. They would only dig a certain amount. They'd only dig bigger plants, and they would come to that same farm again the next year. And a lot of them will share what they get with the landowner. And then there are those that are unethical, those who are thieves.
Have you had the ethical ones as well?
When we first moved out here, we had an elderly man that came, and at that time I wasn't growing it, and so I permitted him to go up, and he dug some. He came back to the house, wanted to give me some, and at that time I didn't want it. And he came back 2 or 3 years in a row. But then when I got interested in growing it, when he came, I just told him, I said, I don't want you hunting on here. He said, fine. Never came back. I never saw where he had been in the woods. So I don't think he ever came back and stole. Some people said, oh, he probably came back. But I don't think so. I think he was a true old ginseng hunter-gatherer who would go out and do it the right way. Because the roots that he had were nice roots. They were only the big ones.
And the other two terms that we've been using kind of interchangeably is stealing and poaching. But you do have, there is a distinction between those, right? Or do you have any thoughts on them?
If I had someone come in when I had cattle and they would poach or steal one of my head of cattle, you could call it poaching, but it's stealing. This is the hard thing for people to understand about ginseng. They don't see it as a farm product, Or if I have a garden, okay, I have tomatoes, I have sweet corn, and if somebody sneaks down in here and goes into my garden and picks them a dozen ears of corn, is that poaching or is that stealing? Ginseng, I plant the seeds. I'm raising it. I paid for the seeds. If someone comes in and digs it and takes it out of the woods and sells it, is that poaching or is that stealing? To me, it's stealing. Poaching, I think, have been a word used especially for animals, like deer poaching, where you go and illegally kill a deer on property. Maybe it's not your property, maybe it's out of season, whatever, but you're removing that deer from the woods. That's I think that's how ginseng, the word poaching, got connected with ginseng. A lot of people see it as a wildlife issue, not as a commercial farm issue. I see it as a commercial farm issue. I see it as they're just stealing, not my corn, not my cattle. They're stealing my ginseng. Now, you can call it poaching. Poaching, to me, is kind of a kind word. It makes me think of eggs. But it's not. It's thievery. It's stealing. That's how I see those two words.
Do you think that calling it poaching makes people feel like it's less serious of a problem, whether it's law enforcement or the general public or whomever else?
Yes, I do. I think when they call it poaching, it throws it into that area of wildlife. And that's not the same. In most people's eyes, poaching of a deer is not the same as breaking into a house and stealing something. And so I think you're right. It softens the real meaning of what's going on. It is really more important, I think, to think of it as stealing, being a thief, than it is just poaching an animal. And I think it's wrong to poach. I think that's a big issue also in this area. But as far as ginseng, I think it is actually stealing, and we use the word poaching. It softens it, and in many people's minds, I think law enforcement, they hear someone's poaching my ginseng. That's a wildlife issue. Call the game warden. They go to court. The judge, he was just poaching. That's actually a wildlife issue. I've got other things on my docket. I can't spend a lot of time and effort with this one, and that's a shame, because the value of ginseng is very high. You can go out and dig for a few hours and get enough ginseng for $100 or more. I look at a root, a good 10, 15-year-old root, that's $1 right there. If you dig 10 of them, you got $10. If you can dig 100, you got $100. And it doesn't take you long. If you're in a patch where someone's planted it, and it's fairly thick, to dig 100 roots.